I know some people are gonna be angry about this one. Why did I buy this? Oh my god, I'm so bored. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ingrid and this is Ingrid Reads a Lot. For today's video, we are doing an unhaul. If you saw my previous video, I did my entire physical TBR video and I will link that up above. But basically, I had so many books that I realized I bought years ago and that I did not have any interest in reading. Some books on this list, as you'll see, it's books that I potentially could read at some day in my life, but I just don't want to keep it on my shelves because these are the only shelves that I own. Space is limited, so I decided that I will unhaul 20 books today and we'll go from there. And a lot of the books that I did not unhaul from that video are obviously books that I intend on reading, so if you're excited for that, I might do other unhaul or keep where I try a bunch of books and see which ones I want to keep and read after reading a chapter, because I thought that was a fun way of kind of going through my physical TBR, because it, you know, like you read the premise of a book, but until you actually read not the entire book but like part of it, you don't really know if you're actually gonna like it. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, so let's get started with this video. First up, we have Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Deanne Harris, and I picked this up because I was curious about meditation, but I figured, and this is gonna sound weird for someone that reads, but if I bought this years ago, and if I actually wanted to learn about meditation, I can just like watch a video or listen to a podcast or something like that. So I figured, I've had this for years and I haven't picked it up. I'm not going to pick it up, so that's why I am unhauling it. And then this book, I honestly don't know why I bought it. Like, I don't know what possessed me. You know when you do things then you have no recollection of like why and how and when? It's this book, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. It says here, the little blurb says what we should know about the people we don't know. I don't want to read this. I don't know why. Why did I buy this? So I'm unhauling this too because I have no interest. And then we have one that I already tried and I gave up around the 75 page mark or so, and that is For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. I think this is a Red Riding Hood retelling, kind of, with the wolf or like a beast kind of type character, and I read I think 75 pages of this and I just wasn't interested, so I'm gonna unhaul it because when I first DNF'd it, it was like a tentative DNF. I was like, oh, maybe I'm just not in the mood for it. But just thinking about this book, I just don't want to read it. So I'm gonna unhaul this and hopefully someone that actually wants to read it will get their hands on it. Another fantasy, we have The Demon King by Cinda Williams-Chima. I'm pretty sure this is a YA fantasy series, and it's also one that I have tried. I think I read maybe like 50 pages of this years ago. I just recall nothing from what I read and I just don't have any interest in reading it, so I'm gonna unhaul it. This one I also tried. It's Witchlings by Clarabelle A. Ortega, and basically this is not that it's bad, it just isn't for me. I think I'm not a huge fan of middle grade, and not to say that I won't enjoy a middle grade ever, but I think it has to be one that's right for me, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna unhaul this. Hopefully some kiddo out there will pick it up and enjoy this, but I tried it and it just wasn't my jam, you know? Next up, we have The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I attempted to start this and I was bored out of my mind, and a couple of people at my job, which is kind of fun, are readers. One more so than the other, and she read this and she said, I didn't really enjoy that and it's not really like that good, and she reads a ton of mystery thrillers. So I attempted to start this because I knew I had it on my shelves, but I'm not gonna read it. Next up, we have Memorial by Brian Washington. This is, I think, a contemporary novel about two men that live together, and from what I read in the synopsis, it's sort of like them going on about their lives, and one of them has to go back to Osaka in Japan because his dad has fallen sick, and I think it's more of, I shouldn't say coming of age, but that's what I mean. It's them kind of figuring out who they are in the world, and I'm not sure if there's a romance between the two, but I'm not a huge fan of contemporary. I picked this up on Book of the Month because I thought I was gonna read it, but I've had it for a while, and reading the synopsis, I just don't have any interest in reading this, so I'm gonna pass it on. Next up, we have A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. This is, I think, a YA mystery thriller. It's like based on Sherlock Holmes. I've had it for 8 years. I think it's like one of the oldest books on my TBR. When I started watching BookTube, this was pretty pretty prominent. I picked this up thinking I was gonna read it. I have no interest, and I figure if I haven't read it in 8 years, I'm not gonna read it now, and I don't want to, so I'm gonna move it along. Next up, we have The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. I picked this up because of Emily, and I think her channel is Books with Emily, I believe. She raved about this book, and it's like a sci-fi contemporary where the people in this world, I think they start to lose their memory, and it's like a gradual thing. I just don't want to read this, I don't think. My thought is that I have so many other books that I am super interested in that I don't want to keep something that I'm like lukewarm about, if that makes sense. Even with me unhauling these 20 books, I still have over 100 books to read. I just don't want to keep this because I'm not super interested. That's the end of it. And then Siren Queen by Nevo. I know some people are gonna be angry about this one because I know that this is like a really beloved book on booktube, but I attempted to read it. It's not that I did it, I'm just unhauling it for no reason. I attempted to read it when I first got it on the book of the month, and I was not into it at all. I think that this has sort of some magical elements to it, but it is set in the 50s with a main character that wants to make it to Hollywood, but it's hard for her because she's Asian and the culture at the time just wasn't accepting, but I just wasn't getting into it. I figure if I do at some point want to read it ever, I can pick it up from the library. I don't have to keep it on my shelf. Oh god, this one is like tough because I have this interest in dark academia, but it seems to me that every dark academia book that I pick up I'm not super into, and I've had this for a while because it's one of Books and Lala's favorites, dark academia. But every time I read the synopsis of this book, I'm like, I don't want to read it. I love watching Kayla's videos, but I've noticed that in some books, not a lot, but in some books we have very differing tastes. So, I haven't told you the name, but this is If We Were Villains by M.L. Real. I'll get back to you on this one. Tentative. Ooh, I'm changing it up in the middle of the video. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I can't say that. I have found that I pick up classics because I think, oh, everybody raves about this and it's such a good classic and blah, blah, blah. And then I never read it, or I attempt to read it and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so bored. So, I don't want to read this. So I'm going to DNF it. And in the same vein of that is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, and I know this is more of like a modern classic, but I attempted to read this because I really enjoyed the first season of the show, and so when I first started watching the show I was like, oh, it's a book, let me pick up the book, and I attempted to read this and I just like wasn't into it. When have you guys ever watched an unhaul video where the person's like, should I unhaul this? Like, what is wrong with me? Just let it go. This is gonna be another tentative unhaul. One that I'm definitely unhauling is The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory. I talked about this a little bit in my my physical TBR video, but basically I love history, and this is about Anne Boleyn, who we all know married Henry VIII, and then she was murdered because he wanted to divorce her, and it was a whole ordeal. But I figured this book is a chunker, and I already know the story. Like, I've done a I think I mentioned this in the other video, I've done a deep dive on Anne Boleyn, and I watched a bunch of like documentaries and stuff. My curiosity about her story is just over. Not that it's over, but I fulfilled my curiosity about her story and what happened and everything, that I don't feel the need to read this chunker of a book. Oh my god, this is gonna fall. This pile of books is gonna fall. Alright, and then another one that I got like halfway through and that so many people love that I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I like this? Is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. And I think they're short stories, and they're about, I keep like leaning back. I'm so lazy. This is like short horror stories, I believe, about being a woman. And I liked the first story where it's depicted in the picture, which I read the story and I was like, oh, that's what it is. This is a neck. I always looked at this cover and I was always like, what the heck is that? It's a neck and she's wearing a bow. The first story is really good, and then I started reading the second story and I'm like, what in the heck is going on? So I just wasn't into it, and I'm not a huge fan of short stories, honestly. So I figured, I attempted it. I got through, how many pages? 23 pages of this. Maybe the Book of Find a Home. The Bone Witch by Rain Tropico. This is another one that I've had for a very long time. Let me see when this book came out. 2017. I've had it for a long time. I've attempted to start it multiple times, not just once, and I find myself losing interest. So I'm gonna unhaul this. I'm pretty sure this was on, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is my library. Like, you can just pick it up on Hoopla immediately. So I figured if I do want to give this a third try, I can do it there. I don't have to own the book. But with so many books out there that I actually want to read, I'm not gonna pick this up. So I know myself, I'm gonna unhaul it. Same thing with this one. This is Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw. Honestly, I obviously kept this because of the special edition. I accept that about myself. I freaking love a pretty cover. I did read The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, and I felt lukewarm about it. And the premise of this novel, I feel even more lukewarm about it, because The Wicked Deep, I actually liked the premise and it just fell kind of flat, but this is just not my vibe, you know. And so I'm gonna unhaul it and give it to someone that actually wants to read it and will appreciate the beautiful book. The Keeper of the Night by Kylie Lee Baker. I got this on Book of the Month. Do you guys notice a trend? I'll pick up Book of the Month books that I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting, and then I just don't want to. I think I stopped doing that for sure. Nowadays, if I look at all the books and there's nothing on the list that I'm not interested in, I just skip the month, because out of all the books that I wasn't interested in, I would pick one that I was like, this sounds kind of interesting, but what would keep happening is that I just don't end up reading the books. That's how I feel about this. And I also checked this one is also on my Hoopla, so I can pick that up if I ever want to read it. 2 more books to talk about, guys. We have A Secret History of Witches by Louisa Morgan. I honestly don't even know what this is about. I think it's like it spans like different generations about witches, and I just don't want to read it. I'm so sad about that. Okay, and then last but not least, I got through 100 pages of this. I was bored, and I think I'm just like too dumb for these types of books, literary fiction, where this is like time travel, and I just wasn't into it. And this is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And I don't think I showed this in my physical TBR because it was in my living room, because I was attempted to get through it. So actually 137 books unread. We're gonna unhaul this because I figured after 100 pages, if I'm not into it, I'm not gonna force myself. All right, guys, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know. I am going to, well, if you're curious what I'm gonna do with all these books, I have a used bookstore that you can get sort of credit for. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna bring those books there, and then if anything, I'll show you guys, like I can tell you on a future video how much I got for credit, or if I picked anything up in place of these books. But yes, if you enjoyed this video, please let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.